Hi there. Welcome to Learning Layout. Today I will introduce layout, proportion, and page sizes. So what is layout? Written language has needed the use of layout, whether it be on this wall, such as on the Temple of Ramses, this cuneiform tablet, or this Aztec codex, to inform the viewer of not only the content, but of its structure. It is a tool and strategy to communicate to the reader how the content is to be read, what comes first, what comes after, what is important, and what is connected. It leads the eye of the viewer throughout the visual information, whether it is short or long. Layout also works with typography to inform the viewer what the tone of the subject matter is, whether it is serious or whimsical, critical or neutral. So what's layout design about? Layout design is about creating a structure on the page and carrying it throughout the design to create unity and cohesiveness. It is also about making the information accessible and inviting. And finally, it is about maintaining the viewer's attention so that the information is seen and understood. Generally speaking, layout design is usually taught immediately as the use of grids, but there are many other ways of employing layout, especially in posters, where the composition layout can be derived from different compositional strategies, from using the golden sections or to using grid structures. As you can see in this Folies Bergère image to the left, compositional structures can be expressed in the page proportion, as the radiating lines from the pentagram create the size of the poster. In this class, as we talk about static images and layout, we will talk about the importance of page sizes and proportions. What do page sizes and proportions convey? The page proportion itself has a tone, and that can be an important design decision. For the lucky times that a designer can choose a proportion, whether it's for a poster or a book, we should really take advantage of this opportunity. The type of composition structure can create a tone and a feeling. Think about how using a strict square grid structure can create a sense of flatness, rigidity, and stillness. Take a look at this Lyntrons poster and note the similarity in tone that it has to the Egyptian grid system. This is a very different tone compared to the more free-flowing poster from before. You can use multiple systems at once to create a more nuanced tone. Before we get into specifics about layout design and looking at examples, I want to briefly touch on how everything needs to be related to the content, as we see on the image to the left. The typography, the grid, and the images must all center around and support the content. A favorite passage of mine is from Massimo Vignelli's Canon on Graphic Design. In it he says, "Appropriateness directs us to the right kind of media, the right kind of materials, the right kind of scale, the right kind of expression, color, and texture. Appropriateness elicits the enthusiastic approval of the client, seeing the solution to their problem. Appropriateness transcends any issue of style. There are many ways of solving a problem, many ways of doing, but the relevant thing is that no matter what, the solution must be appropriate." Graphic design is about the communication with the audience, and we need to consider how the audience will respond to the design. What knowledge does the audience have, and how will the person relate to it? As designers, we're always trying to find the appropriate form. So before we start designing our layout, is there anything we should do beforehand? Here are some highlighted passages from Robert Bringhurst's Elements of Typographic Style, a quintessential book on typography which I recommend you all to read. So before we start anything, we should probably read the text before designing it. As Robert Bringhurst writes, "The typographer's one essential task is to interpret and communicate the text. Its tone, its tempo, its logical structure, its physical size, all determine the possibilities of its typographic form." The first thing he says we must do is that we must discover the outer logic of the typography in the inner logic of the text. The first task of the typographer is therefore to read and understand the text. The second task is to analyze and map it. Only then can typographic interpretation begin. So basically, what does the content dictate? If the text is a simple novel, you probably don't need a complex grid to compartmentalize different types of information. However, if you are making a catalog, you may need many levels of typography to complement the image, describe the products, purchasing specifics, etc. So the typographer must analyze and reveal the inner order of the text, as a musician must reveal the inner order of the music they perform. The typographic performance must reveal, not replace, the inner composition. Finally, we must make visible the relationship between the text and other elements, photographs, captions, tables, diagrams, notes, and reflect the real relationship. How do we inform the user what is connected? How should images, captions, or footnotes be organized with the main text? How do we tie everything together? Alright, let's look at some samples of layouts. Here are a few samples of layouts that I think are interesting. Know how the layout is informed by the content's needs and how the layout creates a tone or feeling. In the following examples, pushing the content aside, thinking about what is the tone of the page? What kind of publications, books, magazines have a similar look and feel? Who would be the reader of these publications and what else would they likely consume? These first samples are from the magazine Lucky Peach, produced by David Chang of Momofuku, Ugly Delicious, and a host of other food-related things, and McSweeney's, the publishing house known for their avant-garde, cutting-edge graphic design. Lucky Peach's main goal was to give the world of fine dining a sort of off-kilter, whimsical sense. In this first example, this layout describes the temperature and the effects it has on boiling eggs. What is very technical information is made fun through the use of speech bubbles and color. Even though it is fun, it is still accurate and maintains its usefulness. This spread on knives shows how the content can match the subject matter. The narrow columns matches and fits right into each of these knives. This is a humorous approach, but also matches the chef's individuality to the knife that they use. The ragged edges of the columns also helps denote the feeling of cutting. This spread on IKEA food is also quite fun. Note how it uses the entire spread as a graph, with the spine forming the y-axis. This large, distinct scientific graph makes the content even funnier because of its ridiculousness by mapping the value to the taste of food at IKEA. Next, we have a more modern design. Take a second to analyze how this layout design feels. What does a large amount of negative space and emptiness suggest about the content? What does the limited color scheme do? And what about the ball motif found throughout? For me, this design looks very fashionable and artistic. Looking at this design, I get the sense the book is more about style than substance. The information is easy to read, but is probably quite niche and for a specific audience, like an art gallery. Next, we have this magazine. It looks old-fashioned, but also modern. The density of the type and the justified alignment of the text in the main body gives a very literary look. I think it would look good next to magazines like The Economist or New York Times. In this example, who is this book for and what is it about? It seems to be for kids learning to build a computer. This is pretty technical information for a young audience. What considerations in the design makes it appropriate for children and their parents, who are probably helping them out? The colors, shapes, and fine typography make it approachable and non-intimidating. The text is formatted in small chunks with lots of space for easier reading. In contrast to that fun, approachable example that we just saw, what about this design? How does this one feel? What sort of qualities do the narrow margins create? How about the very limited typeface choices and the density of the text? For me, the density of the text coupled with the narrow margins gives a really anxious sensation, which complements nicely with the black and white imagery. The rag right's jagged edge creates a sense of uneasiness. There's a large amount of space in the inner margin, which is strangely given, but I think it might be to emphasize that jaggedness of the text. Finally, we have this example. The typeface choices are interesting as the main serif headings have this beautiful elegance to them, complemented by the neutral and static typeface of the body text. The open space and structure make it easy to read. What could the inside of the book look like, judging by the table of contents? Alright, let's talk about page sizes. When we pick up a book, the size of it in our hands already denotes a quality. If it is small, like a diary or sketchbook, it may convey a sense of intimacy. If the folded book is large and square, it might feel appropriate for a large photo book of landscapes as it opens up to a wide spread. Let's take a look at these rectangles and think of what qualities they embody. We'll do a survey in class to see how we all think. Let's take a look at these page and proportion sizes from Robert Bringhurst's Elements of Typographic Style, where he relates page sizes to chords. So what proportion would you use to convey a feeling of dynamism, authority, liberal or conservatism, something corporate, maybe something creative. What proportion would you use for a protest sign? What would you use to evoke something historic? Or what would you use to create something futuristic? Finally, let's talk about golden rectangles and root 2 rectangles. The golden rectangle, golden mean, golden section all pretty much refer to the same thing. It is based off the Fibonacci sequence, which creates a value of phi. The Fibonacci sequence is the sum of the last two numbers, which creates the next number. So 1 plus 1 makes the next value to be 2. 2 plus 1 makes the next value to be 3. 3 plus 2 creates the value of 5. And 5 plus 3 creates the next value of 8, and so on and so on. When you take the last number and divide it by the number previous to it, you get a value approaching phi, which is 1.6190 ... I generally just remember 1.62 to make it easier for myself. The interesting thing about the golden section is that if you cut a square out of it, the remaining rectangle is also a golden rectangle. So you can cut out another square and so on and so on. And if you draw an arc in each of the squares, you get a spiral like you would see in a shell. We will talk about how to use this natural division, the golden rectangle, in layout in our next classes. Another interesting rectangle is based off the square root of 2. This rectangle, when cut in half, quarters, eighths, creates smaller rectangles with the same proportions. These are the basis of the International A sizes. So how would we scale a page? How would we scale the golden section 1 to 1.618 or 1.62 to a tablet size or standard letter size paper? So let's start with a letter size paper. The height of the golden rectangle in this case would become 11 inches. So we would take the 11 inches and divide it by 1.618, which would give us 6.8 inches. Which would become the width for a golden section page that fits on a letter size paper. So our final page size would be 6.8 inches by 11 inches. We can do the same for a piece of tablet paper. In this case, the height of the golden rectangle is 70 inches, so 70 inches divided by 1.618 is equal to 10.5. 10.5 then becomes the width for a golden section page that fits on a tabloid-sized piece of paper. So 10.5 inches by 17 inches is pretty close to the original size of a tabloid paper, which might be helpful for you to design posters on tabloid-sized paper using the golden section grid. Alright, that is all for today. I hope you learned a little about layout and page sizes. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's something you would like me to add. See you in class or in the next video.